Right now, as you watch this video, one of the most critical waterways on Earth is under threat, and the ripple effects are already being felt at gas pumps, in grocery stores, and in the financial markets worldwide. This is the Strait of Hormuz, and today we're going to break down exactly why it matters, and what's at stake if it stays closed. The Strait of Hormuz is a narrow passage of water connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman and from there to the open sea. It sits between Iran to the north and the Musandam Peninsula, shared by Oman and the UAE, to the south. The entire strait is only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. But inside those 21 miles, two shipping lanes, each just 2 miles wide, carrying the energy that powers the modern world. During 2023 through 2025, 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas and 25% of all seaborne oil trade passed through this single strait every single year. On a normal day, approximately 138 commercial vessels pass through those two narrow lanes, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. Let's talk numbers, because the scale of what flows through here is almost hard to believe. In 2024, oil flow through the strait averaged 20 million barrels per day, the equivalent of about 20% of all global petroleum liquids consumption. Think about that. 1 in every 5 barrels of oil consumed anywhere on Earth passed through a gap barely wider than a city. And it's not just crude oil. Around 1/5 of global LNG trade also transited the Strait of Hormuz in 2025, primarily from Qatar, the world's second-largest LNG exporter. Countries like Japan and South Korea source approximately 95% and 75% of their crude oil needs from this region, respectively. China receives roughly 1/3 of its entire oil supply through the strait. Countries including Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, and Bahrain rely on the strait to deliver the vast majority of their oil exports. And there are simply no alternative routes for Qatar's LNG. So what happens when this vital artery gets cut? We don't have to imagine. It's happening right now. Beginning in March 2026, Iranian forces began attacking merchant ships in and around the strait, causing tanker traffic to drop by approximately 70% initially, and shortly after to nearly zero. Oil markets reacted immediately, with Brent crude prices rising above $90 per barrel. Iraq started shutting down operations at the Rumaila oil field because tankers could no longer leave. And with no place to store the oil, producers had no choice but to halt production. With tanker traffic down 90% in the first week of March 2026, the International Energy Agency launched the largest emergency reserve release in its history. All 32 member countries unanimously agreeing to release 400 million barrels of oil into the global market, more than twice the previous record set after Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And yet, experts warned that even this massive release was only a temporary bridge, because the existing bypass capacity, pipelines through Saudi Arabia and the UAE, totals only about 3.5 to 5.5 million barrels per day. That leaves roughly 3/4 of normal supply blocked. Now, here's where it gets personal for the United States. Some people ask, doesn't America produce its own oil now? Why should we care? It's a fair question. And the answer is, because oil is a global commodity, and a global supply shock hits everyone, no matter how much you produce at home. Removing close to 20% of global oil supplies from the market is unlike any previous energy shock in modern history. For comparison, the 1973 oil embargo removed just over 6% of global supplies, and it still caused a devastating recession. If the U.S. fails to reopen the strait, oil prices would skyrocket. Analysts warn prices could reach $100 per barrel or higher if disruptions persist, with dislocations in the tanker market and rising insurance rates driving prices even further. 2. The U.S. economy would contract. Economic modeling shows U.S. GDP growth would decline by about 1 percentage point in the first quarter of a closure, increasing to 1.3 percentage points if the disruption persists for 3 quarters. 3. Asian allies would be devastated. China, Japan, India, and South Korea, critical U.S. economic partners, would face acute energy shortages. China had only about 1 billion barrels in reserve, a few months of supply, with a third of its oil coming through the strait. 4. Food and fertilizer prices would surge. Iran, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE combined produce nearly a quarter of the world's sulfur supply, much of which is exported through the strait, and Africa relies on this region's sulfuric acid for critical mineral mining operations. 5. U.S. allies in NATO would be under pressure. Europe gets 12 to 14% of its LNG from Qatar through the strait, and with no alternative route for that gas, energy prices in Europe would spiral. 6. U.S. global credibility would take a historic hit. The U.S. has maintained freedom of navigation in the Persian Gulf since the 1980s. Losing that ability signals weakness to adversaries, not just Iran, but Russia, China, and others watching closely. Opening the strait by force is not a simple operation. Iran has a variety of shore-based anti-ship missiles, including cruise missiles and ballistic anti-ship missiles. As of 2019, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency estimated Iran possessed over 5,000 naval mines capable of rapid deployment via high-speed boats. The IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guards, has been assigned shared responsibility for the strait and operates fast inshore attack craft, warships, and at least one drone carrier. Even if the U.S. military succeeds in degrading Iran's naval capacity, experts cannot independently assess how U.S. and Israeli strikes on Iranian naval vessels and other targets since February 2026 have affected Iran's ability to continue disrupting shipping. The mines alone could take weeks to clear, and every day the strait stays closed, the global economy loses more ground. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just a geographic choke point. It's a mirror reflecting how deeply interconnected our world truly is. 21 miles of water, 1 in 5 barrels of oil, 20% of global gas, dozens of nations dependent on its flow. Tehran has described the strait as the butterfly capable of sparking a tornado as far away as Texas, and they're not wrong. Whether you fill up a car in California, heat a home in Germany, or run a factory in South Korea, what happens in this narrow passage of water matters to you. The question now is, how long will the disruption last, and what price will the world pay before it ends? We'll be tracking this story every day here on Daily World. Make sure you're subscribed, because this is one of the most consequential crises of our time.